your boy Emily from Sweden, and in today's video I'm going to be teaching you guys how to get good at gold trade-ups. This includes knowing exactly what skins you need to trade up to which knife or glove, how to aim for a specific float value of, for example, gloves, to ensure you get factory new gloves, which items are the best to use in trade-ups, and which knives are the best to aim for if you're doing trade-ups. First, let's start with a very easy question. How does knife and glove trade-ups work? Well, it's very simple. All you need are 5 red quality skins, which you then use in a trade-up that turns into a gold. I can show you here as an example. We have op print streams, and we can use them with a trade-up contract and then just spam 5 random reds in here, and if I were to trade these up, I would get either a knife or a glove. Very simple. All different reds work as long as they're from a collection which has either a knife or a glove, basically a collection which has a gold. So for example, the op Asimov would work because it's from the Phoenix case, a collection which has knives, but for example an op Desert Hydra or an op Long Dog wouldn't work because neither of these collections have a gold. And if you mix and match collections, it's just gonna give you a different percent outcome. For example, here we're using only 1 op Asimov, which means we have a lower chance of a Phoenix knife, but we have 2 AK inheritances, which means we have double the chance for a kilowatt cookery knife. But if you're aiming for a specific knife, let's say you want, for example, a butterfly knife tiger tooth, all of the reds, or at least some of them, have to be tied to a collection which the gold is the butterfly tiger tooth. Now, I've actually prepared a very nice little diagram of every single gold and the ingredients needed to get them. And you can just pause the video if you want to see ingredients and which knives or gloves they trade up to. If you want one of the weapon case knives, which are the oldest ones, they have a lot of ingredients because this knife collection is tied to like 11 cases. Any of these reds on the left side will trade up to one of the knives on the right side. So for example, Karambit Fade, well then you can use either AK Fire Serpent or Sword of the Kraken. It doesn't matter, just use whichever ones are cheapest. If you want weapon case chroma knives, then you can use one of these 6 skins from the Chroma, Chroma 2 and Chroma 3 cases. And if you want weapon case gamma knives, then you can use one of these 4 skins from Gamma or Gamma 2 case. If you want the original Shattered Web knives, then you can use either of these 4 ingredients from the Fracture or the Shattered Web case. And if you want the Shattered Web chroma knives, well, there's only one case, it's the Fever case, so you'd use either the Fama's Bad Trip or the Op Print Stream. If you're aiming for one of the Horizon knives, then you can use either of these 4 reds from the Danger Zone case or the Horizon case. And if you want the Horizon chroma knives, you can use either of these 4 reds from the Prisma and Prisma 2 case. If you want one of the Spectrum knives, which is basically a chroma skin for one of these Operation knives, well then you'd use any of these 4 reds from the Spectrum and Spectrum 2 case. For the individual knives, for example cookery, you can use one of these 4 reds from the Kilowatt case or the Gallery case. If you want the Falcon knife, there's only one case, the Falcon case, so these 2 reds are the only ones that work. Same for the Shadow daggers, it's only the Shadow case, meaning these 2 reds are the only ones that work. Butterfly knife is the same, it's only Operation Breakout case, meaning you need to use a P90 Asimov or an M4 Cyrex. If you want the Huntsman knife, well then you have these 2 skins from the Huntsman weapon case. If you want the Bowie knife, it's also very simple. Both these 2 reds work because they're from the Operation Wildfire case. And if you want the classic knife, it's only the CS20 case, meaning the Op Wildfire or the Fama's Commemoration. And finally for the knives, if you want a Spectrum Gamma knife, meaning the Gamma patterns for one of these Operation knives, well then the only cases that work is Operation Riptide and Dreams and Nightmares, meaning one of these 4 red skins. For gloves, it's also very simple. If you want one of the gloves from the original glove collection, only the glove case and the Operation Hydra case will work, meaning it's gonna be pretty expensive because these 4 reds are the only ones that work. If you want gloves from the Broken Fang glove collection, only these 3 cases works, which means only these 6 red skins work. And finally for the third and the last glove collection, the Revolution glove collection, if you want one of them, you have to use one of these 4 red skins, only available from the Clutch case and the Revolution case. And there we have it. There you see exactly what reds will will trade up to which knives or gloves. It's very simple. Now, let's say you want that butterfly knife tiger tooth, but you also want a pair of gloves. Let's say, for example, you want a pair of sport gloves Omegas, but you really want them in factory new. Well, how do you calculate that float for the trade-up? Well, that's also very simple. Ever since the gold trade-up update went live, trade-ups are calculated differently than before. Previously, calculating float trade-ups was very simple. It just used the raw float value of your skin and the averages of all the 10 skins you used in the trade-up. So in the past, only these top float values would have been good for trade-ups, but now it calculates it based on the percentile, like relative to the float cap of the skin. So let's look at, for example, the sawed-off foobar, which has a very weird float range and was never good for trade-ups because you could only get it in battle-scarred or well-worn. And before this update, if you had 10 foobars, all with a float of 0.4001 and traded them up, they would only have counted towards a well-worn skin because that's what the raw float value is. However, now after this update, since a 0.04001 float is in the absolute top percentile of float values for the foobar, you can kind of think of them as being the same as an extremely good factory new float if used in a trade-up. And here you can see, even though we're using 10 well-worn skins, the outcome we get now is factory new with an insanely good float. Like, just look at the Tech 9, for example. And this is very important to keep in mind if we're trading up to knives or gloves especially. In my opinion, I like this new trade-up system a bit more because all skins are equal. It doesn't matter if it has a float cap or not. If it's a really good float relative to the float cap of a skin, well, you can still trade it up to any number 1 skin. Very nice. So when you're doing trade-ups, no, you don't only need factory new reds in order to get a factory new glove or knife from a trade-up. Say we're using 5 battle-scarred reds for a trade-up, all from the Spectrum collection, and we end up with a butterfly knife tiger tooth. Well, that tiger tooth is going to be factory new even though all red skins were battle-scarred. And that's because the tiger tooth skin basically almost only comes in factory new quality. And there's a lot of knife skins that has this almost only available in factory new float cap. For example, tiger tooth, gamma Doppler, regular Doppler, marble fade, and regular fade. There's a lot of these skins which, even if you use the worst quality possible of reds, you're still basically always gonna get a factory new skin. Now, one thing that is different that does require very good float reds in order to achieve are factory new gloves and also factory new skins which are available in factory new but very rarely. For example, the Boreal Forest, the Scorched, or Forest Didipad. The reason all of these skins like the gloves or the Forest Didipad, Crimson Web, all of these skins are rare in factory new is because this is what the float cap looks like. They're barely available in factory new, so to hit this very specific relative float range, we need to do some calculations. For example, if we load up a trade up with 5 of these factory new SG Dragonfires, well, the outcome we get is still gonna be a decent float minimal wear glove, not a factory new one. And that's because you can see here the float ranges of the Dragonfire and of the gloves we're aiming for. The Dragonfire can be obtained in any of these factory new floats. It can be factory new even though it has a float over here, or factory new even though it has a float over here. But if we then overlap the floats, you can see we move this one down to the part where the glove float cap ends, 0.06. You can see we need an SG Dragonfire within this range to be able to hit a factory new glove. So if we just mark this part as being possible to trade up to a factory new glove and then stretch it back out and move it up, you can see that we're gonna need a pretty good float Dragonfire in order to trade up for factory new gloves. I just wanted to show you guys this so that you yourself can visualize and understand how these new trade-ups work. As you can see, if we change out the float values for 0.0067, which is definitely a number in this purple box, all the glove outcomes we have a chance of getting are indeed factory new. But barely. But we don't care if it's really good or really bad float, we just want them factory new. In my opinion, for knife trade-ups, it's best to aim for a collection which has quite a few of these factory new limited items. In my opinion, one of the best ones would be Spectrum, Chroma, Gamma, or Prisma. Because with all of those, you have a pretty good chance of getting, for example, Tiger Tooth, Marble Fade, or Gamma Doppler. And that's even if you're using only battle-scarred inputs, which should be quite a bit cheaper, meaning you're doing a cheap trade-up, but you still have a very good chance of getting factory new knives as outcome. For gloves, I'm going to be honest, you're most likely just going to be aiming for field-tested gloves. Going for factory new is possible, but it's just so expensive and it's very risky because many of the gloves in factory new are not worth much at all. And I'm saying field-tested instead of minimal wear because minimal wear, because of the float cap that gloves have, the float value of the inputs actually need to be a bit better than your average minimal wear skin. As you can see in this example, we're using 5 minimal wear SG Dragonfires, but our outcome is still a field-tested glove. So you need to improve the float values of these in order to get minimal wear gloves, and for that, you're going to overpay. In my opinion, not really worth it. In my recent video, I actually did a trade-up with mostly field-tested skins, and I ended up with well-worn gloves, which is very unfortunate. Well-worn? They're not even field-tested! And to summarize, right now in the beginning, everyone is absolutely spamming these gold trade-ups because it's new, it's fun, and most importantly, it's profitable. Which is why I think it's fine to do these trade-ups as long as the reds are still pretty cheap or as long as the golds are still expensive, but after a while I think they're going to equalize in price. Well, they have to. But right now, it's a pretty nice, fun, calculated risk where you're guaranteed to get a gold. I hope you learned something. Thank you for watching. Whoopee!